I'm excited about doing this overall podcast just because it has just been a dream of mine. And, we started talking about it. And it's like, yes, we need to have these conversations. And they're so crucially important. And I reached out to a couple other people, and I can't wait to really expand into this arena and really begin having more conversations where this is concerned. So today we are at Caring Conversations, and I am super excited. My guest is Mary Ellen Trello, all the way from Florida, and she is such an amazing individual. She's a real estate agent, and she's a caregiver. And caregiving is such a tremendous task. There has to be a grace associated with doing it. And she's going to tell it first. Mary Ellen, tell us a little bit about your story and how you started on this journey for caregiving. And I know you take care of your mom. I heard about this story before, and it was just so incredible. It touched my heart so much. And I know that everyone out there wants to hear about you and what you do. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I've been in the mortgage and real estate industries for 30 years. This is my 30th year. And so our schedules are flexible, and which is good. And that's part of how this all kind of, I think, came about. But my mother was involved in a shooting.
Wow.
In 1999, when she was 59 years old. I was 33. And she was shot in the back of the head and the chest. And as a result, it nicked her carotid artery, broke her jaw, and she had like a mini stroke. But it's interesting because it wasn't a physical stroke from internal. It was from an external thing, but that came into play with insurance down the road. But anyway, so she went into the hospital for 6 weeks. And when she came out, I have 2 brothers and a sister. And of course, they were business owners, they were teachers, they didn't have the schedule to do this. And Mary Ellen was in a position where my schedule was flexible. And I use that in air quotes because, it's like, okay. And it was not supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be temporary. Mm-hmm. And so after she got out of the hospital, she came to live with me. Well, of course, the shooting happened in North Carolina. It was somebody she knew. And she did everything she was supposed to get protection, and went to court 4 times in 30 days. And the court said, nope, no problem with the stalking and the breaking in her house. And so that's kind of what ended up happening. But when she came to live with me across state lines, that was the first lesson in caregiving. So I know I'm kind of all overboard, and I apologize, but
no, this is good because, there are things that we don't think about even in caregiving. And you had some unique situations with your mom that a lot of people don't even take into consideration when starting the journey.
Correct.
And when we initially had the conversation, there was some insurance hiccups or challenges that you ran into.
Yes, because at the time she did not have insurance. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way that our loved ones come to us has a lot to play on how this shakes out, because in her particular case, she was in North Carolina, I was in Florida. Mm-hmm. She needed rehab when she got out. Mm-hmm. And it was so quick because she was in there for, I'm like, okay, well, when is she coming down here? I'm still not the domestic type. I'm like, I just got to get it done. And that's the attitude that my brothers and my sister, they're like, oh, Mary Ellen, handle it. And that's part of the caregiver's
mentality.
It's a benefit, and it's a con, because that's what gets us into trouble, I think, sometimes. But anyway, when she came over to me, it was around Thanksgiving, because she was shot on Halloween Day.
Wow.
She got out right before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And so we had to pack her stuff up, bring it down here. I had to move to go find a house, because I'm like, okay, well, what kind of injuries does she have? And they're like, well, she'll be in a wheelchair. She has to learn how to walk, how to eat, how to talk, how to literally do everything. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay. So we need rehab. That was the first thing in my head. I'm like, okay, well, let me go get rehab. Mm-hmm. Found a rehab place. I'm like, okay, this is cool. She's getting released. Boom. I go, and they're like, where's your prescription? I'm like, excuse me? and she was discharged with prescriptions, but they were North Carolina prescriptions.
Wow.
They were not Florida prescriptions. And from a rehab standpoint, from stroke victims, so even though mom's was a completely different scenario on how she ended up with a stroke, a lot of us, I think, as our parents are aging, they have a stroke and they can't live on their own, and then they're coming to live with us. So the question is, where are they having a stroke?
Yeah, is it a different state? Yeah.
Yes.
Cross borders. Yeah.
That was the first lesson. They're like, well, you have to have a doctor's script in the state of Florida in order to get rehab. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. No. So she had no doctors down here. And trying to get her into a doctor as a new patient at the end of the year with no insurance was brutal. It was gosh.
So that's one of the things. I mean, it's just like a lesson learned for someone else that maybe, you may be transitioning a parent or a loved one from a different state. Consider the medical aspects of it, ensuring that those resources are in place prior to you making that actual move to ensure success. Because unfortunately, if you don't do that, it can be, because I mean, most people wait till the end of the year to have their medical, do all their medical stuff, because during the year, I know I do. I do. My physical is scheduled to the end of the year, like December, the last week of December, to get the coverage for that year. But so
doctors don't want new patients.
So how did you handle that? I know, me personally as a caregiver, it's just you have to have a level of mental toughness, right? And resiliency, right? How did you, and of course you have your weak moments too, I'm sure. So when you started this journey, how did you handle that emotionally? Because this is such an emotional thing.
It was rough because my mother and I did not get along. It's not that we fought. We just didn't get along. We didn't connect when I was growing up. I was out of the house at 18 and, kind of running my own life. And I was lucky to see her once a year.
Wow.
And I think I shared this with you, when you get that phone call that, your mother's been shot in the face and the chest, because they really didn't know where she had been shot. You need to get to North Carolina, and I think it's a very eye-opening experience, because you're like, oh my God, this can't be the end of the story.
Yeah.
I was close to my dad, but it was like I remember sitting on the plane on the way thinking, I've got to be able to say, I love you one more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to be able to say that.
Yeah.
And that is the turning point, I think, in my particular case, because I didn't want to be those people that felt guilty because they didn't do something while somebody was alive.
Yeah.
And that comes into play as too, because people are like, oh, you're so good to do this. You're so, and I'm really not. I was brought up in a household where my parents they said, okay, when we're gone, the only people you have to rely on is your siblings.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't one person's job or another. If there was dirty dishes in the sink and it wasn't your day, you better be washing those dishes.
Yeah.
So my brothers and my sister, we all worked together during this whole thing, because there was court cases involved and I mean, really stuff where at one point I had to put my foot down and say, look, if you guys want this to happen, you need to go make it happen. I can't do it. I'm done. I'm out. Yeah. This isn't going to work, because the caregiver, especially that first primary one, depending on what you want to do later, is you're getting into the doctor's appointments, to the rehab appointments, to the medication. You're like, I need to do what? And you're right. There is a mental toughness. Oh, and I have to run a business too.
Oh yeah.
As a household, you're like, okay, wait a minute, and it gets tough. And I think you have to keep your sense of humor about you. You have to pick and choose your battles, like I said, now my relationship with my mother and myself is amazing. We make each other laugh
over time. Yeah.
Yeah. She's my support. She's my best friend. And it's crazy how it's evolved. But, you go through certain phases where sometimes it's really, really good. And sometimes it's just, God, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure you had your moments where you just curled up in the ball and cried and just like let it all out, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's occasions. I think I went out to my yard the other day, and, I'm so used to doing everything for my customers and for my mom. I went outside to do something for my own house because I love my house. And I just cried. I'm like, I can't do this all.
Yeah.
I cannot do it all. And that's when you do have to take a step back and care for yourself, which is hard for us to do because we're so used to everybody else in front of us. And, it's you take on as a caregiver, if you have siblings, you're the one that just makes things happen.
Yeah.
Well, you seem to have it all under control. And I think
gosh.
You're like, no, I don't. I really, really don't. I mean,
it's all an illusion, right? Because
it's all an illusion.
I remember my brother, one of the hospital visits, my brother was like, "Oh, Natasha has it all under control." And I'm thinking, I have small kids. I'm trying to be a mother. I have what I now call a multi-generational home because I have small kids. They're not small. I have teenagers now at home, and I remember when my mom had her surgery to put in her defibrillator pacemaker. She was with me at the time, and I brought her home from the hospital, and she ended up running a fever. And the doctor had said to her, if she runs a fever, bring her back immediately. So, she got mad at me, she started crying. She's like, I don't want to go back to the hospital. And I had to be like a tough person and say, you're going to get in the car. If I have to pick you up physically and put you in the car, but you're going to the emergency room. That's it, right? Yeah. And but in my heart, my emotions were all over the place because this is my mom, the person that raised me, that corrected me, that trained me. And I was like, I was tough on the interior, but in my inside, I was in turmoil. And when we got to the ER and, they checked her and everything, she ended up having pneumonia. And I had my daughter at the time was 8 weeks old. I never forgot that, Mary Ellen. She was 8 weeks. I was still nursing, and 8 weeks home. And I literally spent all night at the ER. I got her checked into the hospital. Right?
You think it's a hotel? You're there so much, don't you?
All right.
Hotel General Hospital.
And I dash home, go pump milk, right? And at the time, I was the director for a dance team. I went and did practice that day. Still no sleep. This is still me going on for 24 hours later. Ran practice, went back home, pumped more milk, left my baby with my cut. And I finally went to bed that night after I checked on her. Sunday afternoon after church, I went to her again and I was checking on her. And of course, lots of family was there. I had to put them out the room because I can see in her face. And when you're a caregiver, you can tell different tells.
Yes, you do.
And while she had a smile, I knew something was wrong. Mm-hmm. So I put everybody out the room. And I remember I was like, Mom, how was your night? And she said, it was awful. She had the hospital she's at, the nurses were non-responsive. She was sweating so much. Her gown and her sheets were soaked with through. She got up herself, changed her sheets and her hospital gown. I was livid. I was absolutely livid because she was a fall risk, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, I couldn't just sit here in the wet. And I had to make a decision. And this is not attributing to me. You just got to do what you have to do. I slept at the hospital for that entire week. She ended up having pneumonia. Mm-hmm. And I had an 8-week-old. So I would sleep at the hospital. Wow. And I pumped milk. I had my little handy backpack milk over there, pump milk, dashing back home. I called a lady from my church to watch my baby at the time. And she kept her, and I was dashing back and forth, to the hospital and sleeping because I had to sleep at the hospital every night. Mm-hmm. And, I think back to those days and I go, maybe I could have done things differently, asked for more help of my siblings. I think it's hard when your personality type is just to get it done, that you tend to try and do everything yourself,
Yes, that's a very good point.
Asking for help is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that, I've been doing this for so many years now. I learned that probably later in the process.
I did too.
And, I wish I had asked for help sooner because I already built a precedent around me doing everything. And I can see where it's taken a toll on my body, on my mind, and even on my relationships with my, siblings, because I love them tremendously.
Right.
But, it's kind of like, can I trust you to handle this myself? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, asking for help is okay. Saying I can't do this right now is okay.
But, and you really brought up a good point, Natasha, and is I think when we're first a caregiver, it's so new, depending on, I don't care how old you are, it doesn't matter. Really what you're trying to do is get it all done and get into a schedule, okay?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're right. We don't ask for the help. We just go ahead and put a schedule together. And the next thing we know, it's 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And we're like, wait a minute. Wait. Stop. And we don't ask for help.
Yeah.
And that I think is a lesson, like you said, a lesson learned. It is what it is.
Yeah, and a lot of times I see a lot of people suffering. When I start having these conversations, when I start opening up about it, we suffer in silence. We don't say, I'm emotionally spent.
Right.
After last year's incident with my mom, for the first time in 30 years of Take Me a Caregiver, I went and saw it. I sat on someone's chair and talked about my experiences, and that was hard. It's I was like, ooh, that was hard. Yeah. Have you ever sought counseling or talked to somebody?
I have not. My sister, I had an argument with my twin sister, and I think I've only had 2 arguments in my lifetime with her. And this was one, and it was a day that just did not, it was around Easter, and it just kind of went crazy, and I couldn't do it. And I don't even remember what it was about. And my sister was just like, well, I don't understand. And I'm like, I don't even need to talk to you about it. And when everything calmed down, I finally, called her. I said, it doesn't hurt just to ask me, hey, would it be okay if we took Mom for the weekend?
Okay.
And I said, so, it'd be nice for me not to have to ask.
Yes.
And make all this happen. And and that's what she said. Well, you always seem to have it together.
Yeah.
And that was I have a very close bond with my twin. And I'm like, I don't. I really, really don't. But, and that's not necessarily her fault. I think it's my fault for not saying, look, and to do it sooner. Because she didn't live down here at the time when Mom first came to live with me. It was my older brother and myself. And, we had a lot going through it. There was a legal battle in court, times 2, and depositions, and, rehab. It was just a crazy, crazy time. But we don't ask for the help soon enough. And
I think that is it. And some people feel like, well, I don't know if I can depend on that person to do it. And it doesn't matter, because the reality is that you have, and I've heard this analogy used so many times, and I still have to be intentional about doing it myself, is that when you get on an airplane and that airline attendant tells you that if you're traveling with someone that requires your assistance, what do? You put the mask on yourself first. And to extend your quality of life personally, self-care is absolutely critical.
Yep.
And it's just not just self-care in terms of just taking a break. That mental fatigue is real. That emotional fatigue is absolutely real. And even if it's just having a conversation with a friend or a therapist or someone, finding an outlet to get that stuff off of you is crucially important.
It is.
Because if you don't, all of that pent up stuff, I'm like, man, I wish I had done this sooner.
I know. That's so true. It's so true. But you have to take care of yourself first, and that's the part that we learned late. You're like, okay, and then it's a process to do that too. It
is.
But you're like, okay, let's go out of town for 3 days, and I'm like, okay, let's go. This is happening. What are we doing? And it's funny. People are like, well, like when I travel, but you're familiar with some of the conferences that I go to.
Yeah.
And people are like, don't you hate flying or traveling? I'm like, no, I get on the plane, and if I make it, I make it. And if I don't get to the destination, I eventually will. It's a good process because I don't have to make the decision. I'm not in control of it. I'm okay with that. You handle all of it. You handle it. I said that to a friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine the other day. And I said, if you see a good deal and you think it's good for me to come up there, then just go make the reservations and tell me about it. And and that's what I did. So that's why I'm going to end up in Canada for a week, which most people that know me know I'm not a very cold weather person.
I know. What part of Canada?
It's above North Dakota somewhere. No idea.
Gosh.
No idea. But I was going to go up for Thanksgiving, for Canadian Thanksgiving. And by the time I got around to making the reservation, because, there was too many other things going on, we missed the kind of the window. So it got really expensive. And I called her and I said, this is your fault. And she goes, why is it my fault? And I said, because you know me. I have so much stuff going on. By the time I get around to something for me, I said, it doesn't get done. So do me a favor. You have my permission. Just book it and tell me about it. And then I got to deal with it. And she goes, okay, you're coming to Canada for a week in December. I'm like, this December? I'm like, I can. She goes, yes, you can. So that should be interesting. So I've already started to plant the seeds. It's like, okay, she can't stay by herself for a week. What do we do? I can only prepare so many meals, but somebody's got to be there to, it's like having an 82-year-old daughter.
Yeah, it is.
Except there's the role reversal in there, and you still have the respect because she is your mother, because I know that because the way I turned out is because of her.
Yeah.
So
let's talk a little bit about that, because that is a huge balancing act, right? Because my mom's 83 and you still have to do that whole respect thing, and you still have to give her independence and her feeling that she is who she is as an individual. But then there's the other side where you almost have to be like the parent.
So there's two things on that, and this is kind of a funny story, but when she first came to live with me, we sat down and I made her a promise. And I said, I promise you that as long as you can mentally make a decision for yourself from a medical standpoint, I will honor it. I will fight for it. Done. And I said, and if ever something happens where it's not working and I don't feel you can make that decision, then we'll go in a different direction. And so that was our agreement. And we dealt with that in rehab when the doctors wanted to put her on antidepressants for PTSD. And she's like, I don't want to go on that. And I said, Mom, I think you really do. I said, because, you go through phases of anger and, it was kind of crazy. Yeah. So she did. They put her on medication. And then within 10 days, they're saying, hey, we think your mom had another stroke. I'm like, well, what makes you say that? I said, could it be the medication? And this is the beginning of the advocacy that we have for them. Oh, no, it couldn't possibly be that. I'm like, really? Okay, well, you just gave her an antidepressant. She's a little small woman, And they're like, no, it can't go in that quick. And I said, okay, fine. So then we had to go through another CAT scan, EKG. So they ran all kinds of tests, and they're like, oh, we guess it is the medicine. I'm like, really? So I immediately took her off, but I did fight for her. And I'm like, okay, obviously this isn't working. My mom is fine. She hasn't had a stroke. It's the medicine. Take her off of the medicine. Okay. Yeah. But you have to honor those decisions, because you are taking somebody that has been completely independent. They taught you to be independent.
Yeah, that's the key too.
They taught that to you.
Yeah.
You learned it from somewhere, and they are just as independent. And here they are now, all of a sudden they have to live in their daughter or their son's house. Yeah. And they're like, I have no say, and they feel like they have no say in anything. They want some control over life. And so it was probably, I think I had taken care of her for 9 years.
Wow.
And my parents were divorced, and he was a huge, huge support for me because he knew her. He knows my mom. He's like, you need to do this. He was a doctor, so he would answer my questions. But he said, you have to let her contribute to your household. I said, what do you mean? He's like, for example, have her pay the utility bill. Now, I'm like, a utility bill? That's nothing. And he said, no, you don't understand. It's not a question of how much it is. It's a question of her feeling like she's contributing to the household, that she's not a burden. And so that's what we did. I picked utilities, water, and the pool. So she pays those 3 bills. But I had to get over the pride of saying, I can afford that.
Yeah.
And that's not what the point was. The point was to let her do it. And she loves going out to the mailbox to pay those 3 bills. If you ask me what my utility bill was today, I have no clue.
Wow. Yeah.
But once we did that, she was like, I got to pay the bills. It gives her a reason to do it. And so you have to have that agreement. And when your siblings get involved sometimes, and they're like, I love my siblings to death, just like you do. They're not in it 24/7. And when all of a sudden they come in for like holiday dinner, they're like, they start talking about how their health is. What are you doing this? What are you doing that? What do you mean you didn't get a flu shot? Or some. And now all of a sudden they're looking at you as the caregiver, like, why didn't you do that? And you have to say, look, I made an agreement with her. She is still making her own decisions. She has that right. She's still a person, and you have to stand up for them. And when they're in the hospital, that's a whole other advocacy, because you will not be known as a nice person in a hospital. No,
I'm not a nice person in the hospital.
No.
They're like, the nurses see me coming and they know.
They hide, don't they? Oh yeah. But I think helping your parents keep that independence or that value in life somehow is really, really important. Because I've told a lot of friends about this whose mothers came to live with them, and they're like, she just won't get out of bed in the morning.
Wow.
And I had the same conversation that we just had, and I would get a call like 6 weeks later, and they're, oh my God, Mary Ellen, it worked. I said, what worked? Refresh my memory. That was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We sat down and had a family discussion. Talked about the bills, talked about the utilities and the maintenance of the house, and that everybody lives there, so we should be working as a team. Had her pay like $100 a month. And she's like, the next thing I know, she's getting up out of bed. She's going to feed the chickens. She's doing this. She's like, I cannot believe that made that much of a difference.
Yeah.
So Denise,
they feel like they're contributing their part of it. Even with my kids' schedules, because I'm, of course, in a multi-generational house. So he's like, let me know what's going on. So with teenagers coming and going, and, I remember my daughter, she took off in her car and went somewhere, and she didn't say anything to her grandmother. And I get a phone call like, and she's in tears, like, y'all just don't make me feel like I exist here. I'm like,
yeah. And it's so many small things, It's
these little things, having, I feel like I'm dealing with 2 levels of puberty, emotions of my mother, and then my kids. I have girls that have cycles, and they're just adjusting to puberty, and they have emotional meltdowns for one reason or the other, and they have attitudes. And I'm thinking, Mom, you raised girls, you should know what's going on here. Why are you getting bent out of shape because they're bent out of shape?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be out in probably about 20 minutes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And, just having to deal with that aspect of it has just been one of my biggest challenges. I'm constantly trying to keep the peace in the house. But that idea of having them contribute, you told me that when we had our conversation initially, and I was thinking, you know what, that's a winning strategy right there. Have that conversation up front and say, hey, Mom, I would love you to help, for you to contribute to XYZ. That is incredible right there.
I can really use your help.
Yeah.
Because that's all that they want. They don't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
That's big, it's the big B word. They don't want to be a burden to kids. And like I said, depending on the age when they come to you, it's not easy decisions, but I feel like I was put on this earth to be the best that I possibly can and not to have any regrets. And we all have regrets in life sometimes, but one of my regrets is not going to be not having the relationship with my mom that I do today.
Yeah.
And treating her like a person, but it is a role reversal because yes, she's still my mother, but she looks at me for a lot of the decisions. Like, Mom, I don't need to make those decisions. What's for dinner? I really don't care. What I don't really care what we eat. Cereal, okay, that works. But keeping your sense of humor with them is as well, because you're going to explode, and you're like, okay, this isn't a battle I need to win. you know?
Yeah. I mean, we have funny moments. I was washing her sheets and comforter and stuff, and I said, "Oh, I was helping her get ready for bed," and this was just a couple days ago, and I was like, "Oh man, I forgot to put your stuff to dry, right?" Because I went to go, I was like, "The comforter is not on the bed or anything like that," and she's like, "Okay, go put that stuff to dry." But I need a shower cap because she puts a shower cap on her head when she takes a shower. And so I go upstairs and she wants some like those toothpick things she likes to do, pick her teeth. And I said, yeah, I'll get that when I go upstairs. I get upstairs, I put the clothes to dry, and I just dash right back down. She's like, where's my shower cap? She's asked me this like 3 times. I bust out laughing. I was like, okay, I'll go back upstairs and get it. She knows I'm making these trips up and down the stairs. She's like, you forgot this. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm just laughing because I'm like, gosh, I'm such a blonde today.
I know it's okay. There's a blonde moment, you know, you really do have to laugh about it, and you have to let them, you have to figure out what they can still do.
Yeah.
And don't take that away, because I think one of the reasons my mother does not like to go to my brother's, and this is an assumption on my part, was that they treated her too much like an invalid.
Yeah.
Here, let me get this for you. And I'm like, the more I can get her to move around, the better it was going to be, especially in the beginning. And she got to a point, she's like, we would be late for, rehab. And I'm like, Mom, we got to get, I said, okay, Mom. I would go in and get her. She's like, I don't feel like going. Really? Why? My stomach hurts. Oh, that's a really good explanation, Mom. I said, but our kids could actually come up with a better explanation in less time. I'm going to go out and come back in, and you let me know. So I did. I would go back out, come back in. I'm like, okay, Mom, come on. It's time to go to rehab. She goes, no, I don't think so. Not this morning. My stomach hurts. I said, that's better, but get up. We're still going. I'm late. And I'm like, okay, Mom, if we get pulled over, just look really, really pitiful and ask him how he would feel about giving his grandmother a ticket. And she goes, okay, I got it. You have to interject that humor in it.
You do. Yeah.
And I would always joke, because I would always worry when I would leave the house.
Yeah.
Inevitably, you have to leave the house. So I used to joke, and I'm like, okay, no liquor, no ladders, and no parties. That was our thing, I don't, and you're not allowed to get on ladders at all. You're not allowed to have a party while I'm gone. She goes, okay, but, and I would just come back, and I'm like, Lucy, I'm home. That was our standard joke. For Desi Arnaz, and I let Lucy. I call her Lucy, and people are like, why do you call your mom Lucy? I said, because it keeps the humor in our lives. It really does.
And that is a crucial thing too, because even the Bible says laughter is like medicine.
It is.
And, just having moments where you're laughing, and I'm grateful for my family in terms of that. Just like we keep laughter at the forefront of everything we do. We can turn it into funny moments, and not being where it's always, because it's like living life in a pressure cooker all the time. Yeah. Where you feel like that constant pressure that's there. Yeah. And last year was just really one of the most difficult years in the 30 years that I've been, helping my mom. Yeah. And and it was almost, part of it was medical related, medicine induced. She was in a medicine induced altered mental state. And it was crazy. Like, I said, I'm going to have on my show taking care of a patient, someone with dementia, because it was almost like that. But I was like, this is not her, And we were talking, about all of these things that can come up because of that. So, having that mindset and understanding who they are and what you want to accomplish is truly important. I think the next time we talk, we need to talk about just the dynamics of how do you manage family relationships too.
Yeah, that's a whole other call. But on an end note for you, Natasha, I think one of the things that you really brought up too is medications that your parents are on.
Yes, knowing that, yeah.
My mother got shot because somebody's medication got changed and they didn't monitor it.
Oh, wow.
That's why she got shot.
Wow.
She dated a man for 2 years. They changed his meds for the bipolar disorder he had, and he became a completely different person.
Wow.
They put her on that antidepressant for the PTSD. That's not something she wanted, but I could tell she changed her complete. I'm like, look, that is one of the really hot buttons for me, is if I hear that somebody's medicine is changing And I'm like, look, please, please, please tell somebody that you absolutely respect and love, that if they sit there and tell you that you are whacked out on this medicine, you need to change it, that you will, even though you might be angry, you're going to listen to them. Because this country has a problem with medication.
We do. And it was a sleep aid, because she was having problems sleeping. And I had to do some like forensic, because they thought it was a UTI that she had, because older patients with the UTI can have altered mental state. But I was like, I started looking at all the meds and what was introduced into her life recently. And I was looking at the side effects. And one of the side effects for that particular sleep medicine was altered mental state. And it was crazy. Like, she wanted to jump through the window, and she thought she could fly. And it was just incredible stuff. Like, it was just, being in the ER with her, and her trying to attack the nurses, and wanting to use the bathroom on herself in the bed.
Yeah.
So things like that. And then knowing that this is not who normally my mother was, and then trying to say, okay, let me see what is exactly going on here. You know what I'm saying? And that was a challenge, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
that is crazy. Yeah, we could talk about this all day long.
Yeah, we could. So, but definitely, Mary Ellen, it was just such a delight. I think the next time we're going to go into the extended family dynamic, and how do we navigate that? That's a really sensitive topic, because I know it can be difficult for people sometimes when they are, you're the primary caregiver, and other people outside of that circle really don't understand what that means, because 24/7 you're there. I remember, especially when she was at her lowest state last year, like, would I go into her room and find her breathing? And I never experienced that level of anxiety before in my life. Mm-hmm. And no one outside of my home or outside or anyone else could really comprehend the level. And there's a difference. And they're like, well, I take care and I help too. And I'm like, no, there's a difference, sweetheart. But we're going to pick up with that conversation the next time, because we're both busy business owners, and I'm excited. I think this is a really good conversation. What's one last closing thought you would give for any caregiver out there? That some tip, you've given a lot of good nuggets. What would you tell someone just starting out in the process of caregiving? What one thing do you tell them they need to do?
I think it might be to develop habits early on of self-care for yourself. Because after our last conversations, I was thinking about it. I'm like, how do we get to this point? And it's like, it's because we just tackle it like we do everything else in life. And unfortunately, if you're going to be a caregiver, especially long-term, you've been doing it for 30 years. I'm going on 24 years.
Yeah.
Over, Halloween. And, you look back and it's like, I want to give my family the opportunity, but they have their life. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And no matter how you try it, but I think it's to establish those really good habits and the communication with your parent.
Yeah.
Have those conversations, because the quicker that you establish habits and that your family gets into it, especially for memory care and stroke victims and stuff like that, their short-term memory has a tendency to go. So the quicker you establish habits like using a cane, taking your medicine, the better it's going to be. But I don't even know if I could limit it to one, Natasha. Yeah. But that's probably the first one, is just be kind to yourself and realize that it's okay to ask for help and develop those good habits.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Mary Ellen. I can't wait for us to have a follow-up conversation. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.